Hi, my name is Nikki. I'm a volunteer with Let's Talk Science, and I'm a fourth year physiology student at McGill University. I'm really interested in studying the functions of our body and how all of those work together to keep us healthy and active in our everyday lives. I'm also really interested in how science can explain some of the weird and wonderful phenomena that we see in the world around us, so things that don't make sense at first, and try to pick those apart and see how science can tell us what's really going on. So we're going to look at one of those things today by making a substance called Oobleck. And Oobleck is a little bit like slime, but it's got some different properties because it's a non-Newtonian substance. And we're going to get a little bit into what a non-Newtonian substance is. Basically, it's one that doesn't fall into the three categories of phases of matter. So we know that there's solids, like this table, like the cabinets behind me. There's also liquids, like this water here. And then there's gases, like the air that we breathe. However, sometimes in science, there's exceptions to the rules. And Oobleck, which we're going to make today, is one of those exceptions. So to make Oobleck, what you're going to need is one big mixing bowl. You're going to need about a cup of water. You're going to need 1 to 2 cups of cornstarch, which you can find in your household. And if you want to make your Oobleck colored, you can use a little bit of food coloring, but this isn't necessary. So if you don't have any, don't worry about it. But we're going to start by adding a little bit of food coloring to the water, if you're using it. I add about 5 or 6 drops to our water. And I'm going to make my Oobleck green today, so it really looks like slime. And just mix it in there. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to start by pouring a little bit of the cornstarch, maybe about a cup, into the mixing bowl here. So I'm going to start with about that much cornstarch. And once you poured it in, just take a second and really look at the cornstarch, feel the properties of it, feel how everything feels the same, it's uniform, it's kind of this powdery substance. And then we're going to look at what happens as we slowly add a little bit of water into it. So let's start by adding about half of our water into the mixing bowl. And then just use your hands and stir really slowly to get that to mix together. Just like that. It's going to be a little bit difficult, so make sure you move your hands slowly through the liquid. Once that's mixed in, mine's a little too runny still, so I'm going to add more cornstarch. And a little bit more water. And you can keep doing this, you can keep adding cornstarch and then water and mixing it all together until your Oobleck is a nice sort of slimy consistency. But you should notice something starting to happen. As you're adding more cornstarch, it's getting harder and harder to move the Oobleck, so it feels less like a liquid and more like a solid. And I need a little bit more water, and then I think I'll be good. So once you feel your Oobleck it's almost like it's fighting back against you when you're trying to stir it, that's probably when it's done. So my Oobleck here is done. And now we can try to explore sort of what's going on with this substance. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to try and pick it up and make a fist and hold the Oobleck really hard in your hands. Like this. So at first, it kind of makes a solid thing like this, and then it gets really runny and liquidy. So it felt like it was completely solid, and then it turns into a liquid. And we can try this out again. This time, try hitting the Oobleck really hard on the surface with your finger pads, like this. And at first you should feel like it's really hard, and then afterwards your fingers sink into the Oobleck. Yeah. And again, you'll feel the same thing when you pick it up. It feels like a solid, and then afterwards it gets all runny and liquidy. So, what exactly is happening here? Basically, Oobleck is something, it's called a non-Newtonian substance, which, like I said before, means that it doesn't fall into the strict categories of a solid, a liquid, or a gas. Instead, its viscosity, or thickness, depends on the pressure that we apply to the Oobleck. So when we apply really fast, hard pressure, the molecules in the Oobleck, the cornstarch molecules, clump up and they don't have time to move out of the way for our hand. So it acts like a solid and it becomes very viscous. So super thick, really hard to move your hands through. You'll see the same thing if you try to stir it really fast. It's almost like you're touching a completely hard surface, like that. And then if we move our hands really slowly through it and we apply light pressure, you get something that's like a liquid because we've allowed the cornstarch molecules to have time to move out of the way so they can accommodate your fingers, and it behaves like a liquid. So that's more like if you're stirring really slowly through the Oobleck instead of stirring really fast. And you can play with this a little bit more if you had a ton of Oobleck. It's actually interesting. You can run on top of it if you're running really fast, because the same thing happens. When you run, you're applying fast, hard pressure, so the molecules can't get out of the way and it behaves like a solid. But try to think of other ways that you can look at the properties of it, try to make shapes, try to form it into stuff, and see if you can spot the difference between when it's a liquid and it's a solid. Yeah, and when you're done playing with the Oobleck, the way to clean it up is just add a lot of water into the bowl so that it becomes pretty much entirely liquid, and then you can pour it down the drain. You can also store it in a container if you want to use it later for some more science experiments. Yeah, and just have fun playing with your Oobleck.